Hey Pythonistas, Will here with a sort of an odds and ends show. I think what I'm going to focus on mainly is setting up a Postgres database connected to a Vue.js Flask restplus app in and deployed on Heroku. Some of the odds and ends that I've found, maybe you are trying to set up a database Postgres on your app. Maybe you're deciding and you've decided you want to use Heroku, or maybe you're just looking for kind of pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages. You're not sure where you want to deploy or even how you want to build your app. Stay tuned. I'm going to go through a few things, and maybe by the end of this, you'll get an appreciation for hooking, going from having your data located inside of the app itself, maybe just written down in a list, to moving that to a database and deploying it on Heroku. So stick around and let's get into it. Okay, so this is just the growthtest2.com site where we're doing some just a side project to build out projects, real life projects, not with toy data sets. So if you're interested in that, we should be having another go on a different project, maybe in early January 2020. So stick around if you're interested in that. You could reach out in the comments or just sort of keep your eye on this channel. But what I'm going to talk about is this app that the current sort of class is building with on Heroku. It's called Activist. It's sort of just a little drafty right now, but in a draft format. But it's going to attempt to predict in the next 6 months or the next quarter the likelihood of an individual firm having an activist intervention. And I won't go over exactly what that means now, but the important piece of this is this neat little site that we built, and actually pulling just one company record from a database just to prove this out. But this site that we set up and deployed on Heroku, we used this Flask Altair Vue.js Vuetify example. So just going through this quickly, Flask is a Python framework. Altair, I believe Altair is a plotting library. I don't have much experience with it, but kind of sounds interesting. Vue.js, front-end JavaScript framework that I find just very easy to work with if you're not a JavaScript person. Vuetify, to make it beautiful, you sort of Vuetify it, and a lot of resources in Vuetify. They have a live demo of the site that you can click on. It uses Flask restplus, and then it's really easy to deploy this thing to Heroku if you're interested in deploying it, because it's built on this Flask Vue.js template. So you can check that out. This is going to load up their Heroku app that they have it set on, and you can see that it has a backend resources demo. This is using Axios with it, which is the JavaScript sort of serving up this data, and then Altair, I suppose, or Vega plotting some of this data out. So just very easy to get off the ground here. So that's what we're using to power this. Okay, so let's get into the sort of the Flask restplus, or the data end of this, and setting up a database and getting that moving. Okay, so this is my Heroku dashboard. I'm just making sure that I'm not sort of displaying anything here that I shouldn't be. But you can set up a Heroku Postgres database on there for the low price of $0 a month for, I think, the first 10,000 records, something like that. So that is just sort of a GUI like button you can press once you have your app deployed. And again, the app is very easy to deploy, following along in that GitHub project that I just showed before. So you could see that I've actually put in one table here, and I'll go over that. So I do have data being stored in this Postgres database as my data store, and then I query it from the app. So I'm just showing you in Heroku sort of what you see on your dashboard. Then in settings, you could reveal your config variables, which you'd need to connect to the database. And a lot of this can be managed through your command line once you get what's called the Heroku client. So you could sort of see things like so to push this, I push Heroku master, and that will actually deploy the app. I could just show you everything's up to date right now. Maybe I'll show you how that works later, but you can actually tail the logs. So if your app crashes, which it did when I was setting this up, you could trace back through sort of what's going on, and try to piece that together from the app log. So you can do this all at the command line. Very useful. Okay, so if you were to download that Vue.js app that I showed at the beginning here, you'd sort of get a default structure, and you'd get this REST API resource routing in the app API. And what this does is it feeds data back from the routes to Vue.js where it's consumed. So the front end is consuming the APIs, or getting the sort of marshaling the data from the APIs that are defined back here. And so in the default example, you'd have a list of books, right? And the data for this is stored right inside the app, because there's no database that comes right out of the box. And so likewise, when we were prototyping this, I stored companies as an example for the thing that we are going to model as just a list right in the resources there too. And so the trick is getting this out of being stored directly in the code and into a database. So you can see right out of the box some examples of how you would construct in this case, books route, get all of the books. And then I created a firm route to get all of the firms or companies. I don't want to use company so much because I have a company class, which I'll show you, and then companies table in the database. And I want to call this restplus route the firm. And then I could call this specific firm. But it's actually, this is getting one particular company, and this is getting all companies. And so this is a parameterized route. So let me show you that. So I'm also running this locally with a local Postgres database setup. So I put in 2 companies in here. And if I set up the routes to be the ID. So whenever I switch over the IDs here, I'm going to switch over to whichever company ID. So I had 1, and now I have ID 2. And so these are just somehow I can make individual template pages from Vue for any company in my database. Okay, so in REST you have get, which I've just implemented the get verbs here. REST is built on verbs. I don't have post, which would update an existing one, put, which would create a new one, and or delete, which would delete a record. So all I have is get, so I'm just returning the data from my Postgres database. I know I use Postgres, so if you had if you're attempting to set up Postgres locally, and you're installing things, what you could do is connect with this with this free resource Postgres. I'm actually wondering why I don't have 2 records here, and wondering if I can refresh. Okay, let's refresh that. So maybe I have a second one. So I saw 2 companies in that previous view. I refreshed my database because I just migrated more data, and now I'm seeing it here locally. So this is just a GUI to see your data locally. If you just sort of Google around Postgres GUI, you get a lot of options. There are a lot of paid options, but Postgres is one that I've come across that's used fairly often, I think. and is free. So there's a reference there for using, taking a look into your data locally. Okay, so this is an odds and ends show. So I did want to say that one of the really most difficult parts about Postgres in setting up locally is creating your users and super users and understanding user roles. I found very difficult coming from a database where I could just, and this is Mongo, set up sort of one user. And so I needed to use Homebrew to install Postgres, and had to use a bunch of different websites and different references to figure out how to actually interact with the Postgres the Postgres permissions locally. So don't be too discouraged if you find out that you are having a lot of trouble setting up Postgres locally. The first time for me was not very intuitive, and so you use psycho PG with Python to connect, and you need your database URI. So let me back up and go back into the code. These are just some of the resources I use. This is all to say that that you shouldn't feel too discouraged if you are getting really frustrated with user permissions for Postgres locally and once you set it up on Heroku. Okay, so let's keep moving back here. So as I said, these are the get routes that will get an individual company or firm in this case. Get all of them in this case, and then get a specific one in this case. And so what you see here is that they're querying the company model, company query, order by. I'm ordering by the name and getting all of them. And then in this case, I'm using user ID, which is actually just the firm ID, and getting the first one after filtering that. So where is this company thing coming in? So this is in App API Resources, and I'm bringing in the company where I put it in App Company. Maybe I should have put it in a models folder, models directory. As this grows bigger, you could do that. I chose not to for now, just to keep my imports a little bit sane. So this is how you set up a model in Postgres, or sort of the schema here. You name the table. The table name is companies. This jives with the Postigo companies table that you see here. I have ID, which is my primary key, a name for the company, which I've given as unique and set it as a string. And then this one variable that we'll start with is this activist likelihood. Now this schema is likely to expand as more pieces of information are brought in, and I will have to migrate existing records from there. But you could see that this is how you set up your typical database model using SQL Alchemy. So SQL Alchemy is another prerequisite here to connect Flask SQL Flask SQL Alchemy will help you initialize a database. There is a little bit of work if you actually are going to seriously follow along and try to create this app in initializing your database. I do that through a create app function here in the init. And then I create the app. And then from Heroku's standpoint, when I use this file run.py, I use app.run. Sorry, that's for local development. Your proc file is actually what Heroku is looking for. And this proc file using GUnicorn is looking at app directory, and it's looking for app. So in app, in the init, we initialize the app. So this proc file is saying web GUnicorn in the app directory, get the app, and then I have a log file here. Okay, so this is just, again, some odds and ends. I want to show you some of the the Vue.js just quickly here. So the Vue.js comes in source. We've been looking at the Python part of this. And these books and Vega cars are from the tutorial that comes right out of the box. I haven't gone through and deleted those yet. But let's do something like this is the component view of Vue.js where I'm importing a component. Now that's a little bit more Vue specific, which I won't go into in this tutorial, but Vue is based off components. I'm not sure if I should have actually made that a component because I'm only likely to use it in one place, but that's more Vue.js. But here, this is the companies page, so the individual companies page on my local host, and I'll prove that to you by just saying what this is a live transformation of the page for company. So if I save that, I have yarn running, and this is all explained in the sort of tutorial setup out of the box GitHub project. So yarn is going to change that for me. And so I can access in the template using the double handlebars attributes of the model. This doesn't seem like it wants to change for me. Let's see. This is a live transformation of the page for company. Okay, great. So I hope that proves it to you. So like all good views, we have the template piece, which is the HTML. Again, I am querying attributes of the data from using the double handlebars. Down in here would be the style attributes if I want, and then the real querying of the Flask restplus API is happening in the script tags, which are pulling from Axios, which is the library, I suppose you'd call it, to hit the API, and then on the API /user, get the route parameters, which are the company IDs, and then return the data that you see there. Right, so Axios is going down and again hitting this API resources route. So I said it was the specific company. So let me go back there just to remind us. Specific company, the route is user, and then I call it the user ID. Now, I should standardize all these names. It's really poor naming conventions, but you can see user ID. Here, Axios is hitting that get, is using get on the API route to get that data. So that's the whole sort of diagram of this system. Okay, so why don't I go through and prove that prove that on Heroku, I'll show you how to migrate data, and maybe this will make all of this more clear. So here is an example script that I use to migrate some information. So if I wanted to, or I'll do this locally, I have this localhost set up, and I don't have a company 4 set up. So if I go to all companies, actually I only have 2. So the next company here is going to be company 3. If I go to company right now, there is nothing. There's no data to actually render. Should probably put some kind of page to say that. But I do have this script that will insert a company. So this is a migration script. So how I'm going to do that is with a little bit of SQL. This is the SQL query. So insert into the companies table that I set up when I set up the Postgres database, the attributes name and active as likelihood, which is in the company model. And I'm going to return the company ID that's going to generate for me as the primary key. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we use the library psychopg2, which you can pip install. You should just be able to pip install that. You also need to understand your SQL Alchemy database URI, which is just a mixture of things. So I think I have it in my config, exactly what it is. So app config, right. So here it's just PostgresQL, PostgresQL localhost activist DB. This is my database. It's that localhost, and the name of it is activist DB locally. We connect to the database locally. We get a cursor. Then we execute this SQL command that we set, the insert, and from the input parameter, which I'm going to pass a dictionary, I'll get the name and the activist likelihood parameter from that dictionary. And then from that execution, I'll return the company ID, commit, so actually execute that command, and then close the cursor and return the company ID. So let's say, let's instead say return the company ID. So a new record now. And instead of inserting one record at a time, I could insert multiple. But let's say we want to insert company name Zebra 0.1 for this activist likelihood. So it should come down at the bottom here. Well, I want to put it between A and G. So let's make it baseball, whatever, AB. So it'll come in. I just want to show you that it's going to alphabetically order the companies by name. And then it should come in as company number 3. So what do I need to do here? I need to export a SQL Alchemy database URI. Before I do that, maybe what I should do is not set it and just see what happens. So if I do migrate companies, which is the script that I just updated, inserting a new record now. Okay, missing DSN and no parameters. So I think that's right. It's giving me this missing DSN, telling me that I don't think it can connect. So I'm going to export that message is actually a little cryptic to me. And it's not obvious that it failed. Whoops. So this SQL Alchemy database URI, I'm going to get it from config. I'm going to call it this. And you could just look up any Google search will show you what the database URI should be. You can get your database URI from Heroku, and it's actually the one that you would use. Okay, so inserting a new record now. I should have printed that it was successful. But if I go to Postgres now, and I'm going to hit this refresh button there, I see that baseball was inserted locally. And then if I refresh companies, 3 companies are shown. Baseball is slotted in alphabetically, and then the number 3 record should be inserted here. So this is just creating a CRUD app with Flask restplus, some gotchas showing you how I take a look at this on Heroku, and then this one, number 3, should load company baseball. So just a few odds and ends. I just wanted to record this video. Hopefully it'd be helpful to someone, and I wanted to record it before I forget it, because I don't use Postgres. I use a NoSQL sort of solution in my day-to-day wanderings in my day-to-day doings. So this is relatively new for me. So hopefully it'll be useful to you, and you can see how to deploy Flask restplus, Vue.js with Postgres on Heroku. So good luck in your projects, and I'll see you in the next video.